When the devil's in the mood, nightmares come pouring out of hell.
Welcome to the 116th episode of the Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast.
So damn paranormal.
My name is Jason Knight, host of the show, and with me, as always, is...
Fuckface McGee. No, I mean Oscar Spector, sorry.
Producer extraordinaire.
I'm so sorry.
And podcast co-host. And in the background, patrons could see her playing Zelda, is Miss Lexi Raven.
Yeah,
Hi,
but
Lexi.
she said hi, by the way.
Hi.
She's playing Overwatch.
And you're done. Oh, now it's Overwatch. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Well, episode 116. This is Extraterrestrial Extravaganza Part 2, recording this evening. And as always, before we get into the show, let's do a quick round-the-table catch-up on what's been going on for the last 2 weeks. A lot on the political landscape.
I would say so.
Socio-political landscape.
Yeah.
Oscar, how have you guys been doing, man?
Well, in the great city of Chicago, as you know, has been under extra quarantine. It's like a quarantine plus, where people are now on curfew.
Yes.
Today, we got the notification, even we're recording on Saturday, the 6th of June, and we're still a week later, almost over a week right now,
Yes.
are on curfew from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m., except for like, what is it called? Essential workers. Except for essential or personnel. So yeah, me going out there right now could very much lead me to arrest, you know?
That's
so
true.
As I'm staying home even more, it's like I'm staying in place even more than I was before. And that stuff has been, you know, I mean, this is just a little bit of a change for sure. I mean, there's been some unfortunate looting and rioting nearby my house. I live over by a semi-famous Chicago landmark or shopping center is called Brickyard.
Yep.
Brickyard got hit pretty big. What was it, like 5 days ago? Something like that. I don't remember, like a few days
beginning
ago.
of the week, Monday.
Yeah. Like Monday, yeah. And it got hit. A lot of storefronts, Foot Locker, a lot of places there got destroyed. Police are, I mean, still not fixed completely yet, but if you go there now, it looks like looks very strange. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
And a convenience store, a local owned convenience store, half a block from me, also got looted out of nowhere seemingly, because there's not much storefronts there. It's just like just that place. And I don't know if that was racial profiling or convenience for whatever rioters did it, or people just taking advantage of it. They see the news and they just go out and do something. I don't know. I don't know any details about any of this. I know a lot of people that I know, ex-friends or old teachers and people I used to hang out with more often. They're out there all the time. Not my close friends yet. They're all staying home. But a lot of people are, and it's a tough landscape. Not just Chicago, obviously, but
no, this is worldwide.
This is worldwide now. Yeah.
So you're saying you do know people who are out there protesting?
Yes.
Yeah. Not on the other end, but they're protesters. Got it.
Yeah. No one that I know, as far as I know anyway, has done any kind of violence of any kind of thing, not to property or person. I mean, and they've just been peacefully protesting.
Good. Yeah, that's their right to do so.
I've seen their videos and stuff. It's a tough landscape. Everyone has their own opinion. It is no one right answer either. It's one of those situations that is truly vexing and complicated. And obviously, we're not going to do all that here. But it seems like, Jay, before I leave it on to you, it seems like, every time, because 2020 is insane. There's always something huge.
It sounded like you clipped out for a moment. Could you say that part again?
Yeah. 2020, the year, is insane. It seems like every month or something, there's some new facet of horribleness going on.
Absolutely.
And it's all like prime subject or prime material for us to cover on the SOS. There's so many like conspiracy and like shady things going on in the world in relation to the riots. That's like the latest thing. And, we talked about COVID, but we talked about COVID specifically as a disease, but we haven't mentioned all the insanity that's going around it, people, what they're doing, organizations that are crumbling from it or thriving. There's so many, it's like we can't even have an outline anymore on what we're going to do this year. It's going to be done for us. So we're doing Alien Extravaganza right now because we're keeping to schedule. But it seems like, man, I don't like. It's just like they're handing us shows to do.
They really are
giving us like so much material for us to expose.
Yeah, one of the things we were talking about before we jumped on the mics was the protests, of course, and the riots, and the mysterious piles of bricks that show up.
That's right.
At these riot sites or at these protest sites. I should probably say protest.
Yes.
To not offend anybody at these protest sites,
Yeah.
Who's doing it? For what purpose?
Right.
That's a show in of itself, I'm sure.
Yes.
So you're right. 2020 is handing us things on a silver platter, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And, I was contemplating before we got on the mics whether or not we should say anything, about the protests, not out of disrespect, but just not to be, we never really bring politics or those kind of issues into the show, right? Unless Dave Black was here, which he's not any longer, and we don't talk about that stuff. We stay fairly neutral on this show, not to offend anybody, but and I was thinking, if we do say something, what do I say? I'm not a super political guy. I never have been. That's not the way I was raised.
Me either.
But I live by the golden rule, do unto others, right? You want to be treated with respect, show other people respect until they stop showing you respect. That's what I teach my kids. Give everyone a chance until they prove otherwise. Right? The golden rule,
I agree
do
with
unto
that.
others.
Yeah, I definitely am in that same vein.
All lives matter, whether you're white, you're black, you're pink, you're purple.
Yeah.
And if you're an asshole, you're a fucking asshole, and you're going to be treated like an asshole.
Yeah.
Again, going back to do unto others, right? The golden rule. So that's really my stand on this whole thing. Treat everyone with respect until they prove otherwise, that they don't deserve that respect. No matter the color, the race, religion, creed, whatever.
Yeah.
Orientation. Doesn't matter. That's how I live my life. That's how I'm teaching my kids to live their life.
Yeah.
All lives matter. Give everyone a chance until they prove they don't deserve your time or effort. That's it. And unfortunately, if you're an asshole, there's going to be repercussions to being an asshole.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. I guess that's how.
I mean, there's nothing else to say. There's no bow on this for us.
Nope,
but,
not at all.
Just to say that we're going to keep this out of the main show. This is probably as the most we're going to talk about it. I mean, unless some catastrophic thing happens that we cannot not avoid, right?
Yeah.
And that's not to do anything or not to. It's just the purpose is not to fan any flames or quiet down any flames. It's just to continue on with original programming, which is what you're here for anyway. So,
exactly.
There are great podcasts out there for this kind of thing, and
100%. We're not one of them. Exactly. You did mention unless something catastrophic happens, though.
Yeah. Did
you know that? It would have happened already. I'm looking outside here.
Are you talking about the moon?
No, the football stadium-sized asteroid that was whizzing by Earth today.
No.
It was supposed to happen at 11:20 Eastern time. And of course, that's 10:20 here in the Midwest. We're recording, it's 11:07 Central, so it would have happened already. But yeah, football-sized, did I say meteor or asteroid before? Because they're classifying it as an asteroid.
You said meteor, I think, but asteroid. Yeah.
Asteroid is what they're classifying it as. I apologize. Was going to come within 13 million miles of Earth.
Wow.
Or 7 times the distance of the moon to us right now.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Did I say that right?
That makes sense.
And apparently you're supposed to be able to see it in certain parts of the world, not here in by us. But yeah, it was a big one. It was a big one. If it would have hit, it would have destroyed us all. No doubt.
Yeah.
No
Wow.
doubt.
And
We would
all
have
of our-
fallen into nuclear winter or whatever they call
all
that
of our bickering would have meant nothing
at all.
at all, right? And that's how easy it can all go out, right?
Yes,
Right? For each of us separately
That's
or
right.
together.
that's right.
That's fucked up, Jay. That's
Yeah.
I didn't know that. I did not read
Yes,
that.
sir.
I
Yes,
missed
sir.
that completely. Did not see that in my timelines or anything.
Yep. So, but it was supposed to have already happened. We're here.
Yep.
We're reporting. We're good.
Huh? Did it get daylight somehow?
I know, right? But I am looking out of my office window here. There's supposed to be a strawberry moon, where the moon is sort of pinkish red.
Was that today? I thought that was yesterday. I'm not sure.
That one I'm not sure on if it was today or yesterday, because it wasn't yesterday. I didn't see it pink yesterday. And right now it's just a super hazy white. Looks pretty creepy out there, actually. But yeah, with that said, what else? I do want to say quickly thank you to all the listeners who either sent me a message on Facebook, DM'd me on Instagram, or sent us emails to the contact at chicagoghostpodcast.com email address, offering their condolences and sympathies for my father, for losing my father. Thank you very much, listeners. That meant more to me at that time than you realize, so I appreciate it. I also do want to mention a listener email we received, Oscar, if that's cool.
Yeah, let's do it.
So again, contact us. Contact at chicagoghostpodcast.com. We had a listener write in. Her name is Amanda L. or Eldritch Waif U. Eldritch Waif U. She sent us an email and said, quote, "I found out about your podcast while researching the Bohemian Club. And ever since, I have been binging episodes. I think the podcast is criminally underrated. I don't know if you have covered this topic, but I would like to see what you and your crew would think about Stan Myers, the so-called inventor of the first water-run engine, and who may have been killed by the CIA. Thank you for the entertainment and have a good day," end quote. So that's an awesome email from Amanda, and I agree, Oscar. We are a criminally underrated podcast. So listeners, tell all your friends and family about the Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast. But I think she's got a good idea, an episode about famous inventors that died under mysterious circumstances would be a great topic to cover.
Right. It kind of like the thought of stifling technology and changing, potential economies.
Exactly.
I know a lot about this. I've heard so many different, yet roughly the same kind of stories about this guy. I didn't know his name though at the time. This guy who invented an engine, a car engine that would work on running on water, right? And I heard so many things like that. Or you hear stories of I heard this one story. Sorry, I don't mean to go on a tangent, but I heard this one story.
Cool.
I think it was through my father. Now, he didn't go through it. He heard it from someone else, and he experienced this. One other person experienced this, but he told me the story. It was that this guy was out he was out in dealerships looking for a new car, and that he picked one out, right? And they let him drive it right out of there kind of thing. Yeah. And when he did, his first week he spent on it, or first 2 weeks maybe, I don't remember how long of time, but some time had passed with him in his new car. And that this car would not need gas. He would drive it. He filled the tank or whatever tank was in there already, and he realized that the tank would not decrease that much as he thought. That he spent he drove X amount of miles on one tank of gas, 3 times longer than he is used to, than he thought possible.
Okay.
And that at some point, I think it was 2 weeks after he got it, the company that owned the car or previous where he bought it from came back and asked for it back, that they gave him the wrong car.
Oh, shit.
And that he was like, I don't want to give it back to the car mileage, and this thing is amazing.
Right.
But that he was forced to do so under penalty of some lawyer thing. I don't remember anymore. The story goes hazy from that point in my memory.
Interesting.
But this was years and years ago. He told me this. And I'm like, damn, the idea that this exists has always been existed, but people companies want people to spend more.
Oh, gas and oil,
rely on
of course.
Right. And gas. So,
Yeah.
it makes me think of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it would be a great topic. Something, and I could work into this inventors killed under mysterious circumstances topic. I could introduce someone that I've been interested in. I've researched over the years, Philip Taylor Kramer. He was the bassist for the band Iron Butterfly. Indagata da vida, baby.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. So even though they were fucking whacked out of their mind on acid, this Philip Taylor Kramer was also an inventor, and he worked on missile guidance systems for the U.S. Department of Defense.
Really?
Among other things, yeah. And Kramer's death, too, a very interesting, mysterious story. That they say may have been murder because of some technology he was working on that some other person or organization or body wanted.
Right.
So very interesting stuff. So, man, I think she's onto something here.
Yeah, and then you think of the most famous case that that definitely was involved by some government interruption, like it was like shady. Was the whole Tesla versus Edison?
Absolutely,
right.
It could totally be argued that
everyone knows it, except that Tesla managed to break through a lot of these people, unlike Stan Myers and Kramer, because Tesla was just that much of a big influence still.
Yeah.
He managed to still break through in the influence scale of the world setting. Absolutely. But his inventions were completely stifled. Completely. He had better knowledge of electricity and how to use it.
Yes.
Than a light bulb, than the Edison stuff.
Yeah.
But Edison had the contracts.
Completely agree.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good topic. I think it's something we should do. And of course, what Amanda mentioned about the Bohemian Club, of course, she's referring to Bohemian Grove, right? Over in California. And of course, we did 2 awesome podcast episodes about Bohemian Grove. Listeners, go back and check out episodes 92 and 93. If you haven't listened to them already, it's all about the mysterious, the clandestine Bohemian Grove.
Yeah.
Check it out. You won't be disappointed. I want to run down the contact info very quickly.
Yes.
Easiest way to contact the Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast is go to our website, chicagoghostpodcast.com. From chicagoghostpodcast.com, if you click on follow, you can get to all of our social platforms, including YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and of course, Patreon, right? If you don't know, we are on Patreon. And for just $5 a month, you could get access to never before heard podcast episodes that will not appear on this public feed. You'll get video podcasts. We're rolling video right now. You get cool swag, stickers, big, huge podcast lapel pins, all sorts of fun stuff. Mentions on the show, great things. That's just for $5 a month. And we could use your support. So please go to patreon.com/Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast. That's patreon.com/Supernatural Occurrence Studies Podcast, or just go to our website, chicagoghostpodcast.com, click on follow, then click the Patreon icon. It'll take you right to us. Oscar, this is my favorite part of the contact info, our phone number.
Why is that? Why is that? Is that because you blatantly lie to our precious audiences, listeners?
I would never do such a thing. I think an angel.
Look, no one. I mean, okay, I'm sure that a lot of our listeners are from Chicago. I bet you that no one knows what area code the fuck you're talking about. And I think
you mean the 872 area code?
That's not a real area. I mean, whatever bumfuck Colebrook, New Hampshire area code you're using, it's not. It doesn't go anywhere. It's like an empty office. It's like it goes to the man in black. It goes to like some poor assistant. You remember those commercials from Verizon? Like, can you hear me now?
Yes.
He goes around everywhere, right? That's the whole joke. And the guy on the other end of the phone, that's who people are contacting. The guy who says, yes, I can hear you now. Right?
Do you suggest they call our number or they don't call our number?
I don't know. I mean, if they don't want spam, I say don't do it. If they don't want like what do you call those calls that you don't like? Fuck me.
Telemarketers.
Thank you. If you don't want telemarketers, right? Don't use the number.
Don't use the number.
I think Jay is just, I think Jay really likes April Fool's Day, and he just makes it April Fool's always. And
every second Monday, it's April Fool's for me.
Right, basically. So I'm just warning the listeners: the following number is not real. Go ahead, Jay.
872-529-0767. That's Chicago area code 872-529-0767. Leave us a voicemail, send us a text. We'll read them and play them on the show. And our phone, Oscar, has been pretty quiet lately. So listeners, send us some things.
The listeners are smart. They're smart.
So we got the phone number. I mentioned the email address. Go to the website. Support us on Patreon. I think that is about it. What do you say we take a quick break? And while the normal podcast feed gets some commercials and some interlude music, our patrons will see something fun from our recording spaces. And I got something that I'm not sure if it's legal to have or not, sitting just to the right of me, that I'm going to show to our patrons. It's a gray area.
I would say so.
All right, let's take a break. Listeners, welcome back to the show. Well, the lights are, I can't say it anymore.
You could say whatever you want, Jay.
The lights are turned down low, the drinks are flowing, and the ceremonial candle is lit.
The 1-2 thing.
Let's start this show. So, listeners, first off, this is a part 2. If you haven't already, please go back and listen to episode 115. Extraterrestrial Extravaganza, Part 1. Now, if I had to sum up the premise of episode 115, the premise would be that it's erroneous to credit the famous Roswell UFO incident of 1947 as being the very first up-close and personal UFO event. Even though it's a common mistake, Roswell is not our first contact with our friends from above. As we discussed in episode 115, there were at least 7 additional UFO-related events, UFO crashes, actually, that happened in New Mexico, as well as in other parts of the country, right before and right after the Roswell incident of 47, resulting in the year 1947 to be nicknamed the Summer of the Saucer. We discussed how the additional, rarely talked about UFO crashes in New Mexico seem to have centered around Los Alamos National Laboratories, and specifically a group of high-powered radar stations built to help protect the skies above Los Alamos, which gave rise to the theory that it was us, the United States, that was responsible for bringing these UFOs down, using our high-powered radar systems as weapons. In episode 115, we also discussed the mystery airship wave of 1897, which culminated in the Aurora, Texas UFO incident and an alien named Ned, a fascinating UFO crash that happened half a century before the Roswell incident. We also discussed the Kenneth Arnold UFO sighting, which happened less than 2 weeks before the Roswell incident. And as a result of the Kenneth Arnold sighting, words like UFO, unidentified flying object, and flying saucer were injected into UFO lexicon forever. In the last episode, we covered a crazy UFO event called the Maury Island incident, where supposedly a crippled UFO rained molten hot debris onto an unsuspecting boat, injuring a passenger and killing a dog. And the Maury Island incident is the event that gave rise to the mythology of the terrifying Men in Black. We also talked about the Cold War, nuclear weapons, government cover-ups, recovered alien bodies, the Truman Doctrine, and we included a bunch of photos and a crash map in the episode show notes to enhance the episode. So again, if you haven't already, go back and listen to episode 115. Go ahead, we'll wait. Now, for this episode 116, we're going to focus mainly on two events. Right, Oscar?
Yes.
We're going to get deep into Roswell, the big granddaddy of all UFO stories, the one everyone knows about.
Right.
And then we're going to talk about a very famous, probably the most famous, abduction story.
Abduction story, right.
Right? Later on in the episode, that of Betty and Barney Hill.
Mm-hmm.
Correct? So let's jump in to Roswell, because this story is crazy. There's a lot here. A lot of names, a lot of locations, a lot of job titles. I mean, it gets pretty nuts. So, all right. So when on July 8th, 1947, just 4 months after President Truman basically declared war on the Soviet Union and on communism in general with his Truman Doctrine, the Roswell Army Airfield, or also known as the RAAF, issued a press release stating that a, quote, flying disc had crashed on a ranch near Roswell, New Mexico, during a powerful storm in mid to late June, or early July, depending on which story you read, 1947. A pretty spectacular claim that instantly captivated the world, frightened it even. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's explore how this sensational press release came to be. Now, it all started on June 14th, 1947, a week shy of 73 years ago at the time of this recording, actually, with a man named William Mac Brazel and his son, Vernon, or Bill, again, depending on which story you read. Now, Mac Brazel was the foreman on Foster Ranch in Carrizozo, New Mexico, a ranch used for sheep, about 30 miles southeast of Corona, New Mexico, and Roswell, so you know, is about 95-ish miles southeast of Carrizozo. Now, on the morning of June 14th, 1947, Mac and his son were driving across Foster Ranch when Mac noticed something strange off in the distance, a crash site. In Mac's words, it was a, quote, large area of bright wreckage made up of rubber strips, tinfoil, rather tough paper, and sticks, end quote. Now, some reports you'll read say that Mac discovered that the sand around the crash site on Foster Ranch was melted to glass, and that the melted glass was jade-like in color, just like the sand at Ground Zero when the atomic bomb went off. The one nicknamed Gadget, the one that went off at Trinity Site back in 1945, like we talked about in the last episode. Remember when we talked about Trinitite? What they named that jade-colored sand after the nuclear bomb went off, the atom bomb went off? Supposedly, this same thing was found at the Foster Ranch crash site. Weird. Other stories say that some of the objects Mac Brazel discovered at the crash site had strange writing on them, like hieroglyphs. Doubly weird. Now, of course, no one could confirm if these stories are true, but the stories are out there nonetheless. Now, the wreckage Mac found was caught up in sagebrush and gravel on the desert floor, and apparently Mac Brazel left the items where they lay for some time, because it isn't until July 4th, 1947, that Mac decides to gather up all the wreckage he could carry, and not knowing what to do with it, Mac takes the wreckage to friends in Corona, trying to get help identifying the wreckage and trying to get people, his friends, to go back out to the crash site with them to investigate further. Mac tries to get drugstore owners Archie and Geraldine Perkins to go to the Foster Ranch crash site with them, and they refuse. But Geraldine Perkins later said that she helped Mac Brazel make a phone call to Roswell, presumably to a man named Sheriff George Wilcox. We're going to talk about Wilcox later.
Yeah.
Mac Brazel then sought help from a man named Jesse Wade, owner of Wade Bar in Corona, New Mexico, who apparently was showing some of the Foster Ranch wreckage right there at his bar. But Jesse Wade also refused to follow Mac out to the crash site. But Jesse Wade did insist that Mac Brazel contact the military over in Roswell for help, for assistance. And that would be the Roswell Army Airfield, the RAAF. Now, before heading to Roswell, Mac also makes a stop at Proctor Ranch and shows some of the wreckage to a man named Floyd Proctor and his wife. Now, according to a statement made by Floyd Proctor, he tried everything he could to damage some of the wreckage that Mac brought him, specifically the aluminum foil-looking pieces. And as the story goes, Floyd tried to cut the material, scratch it, even burn it, to absolutely no avail. Floyd Proctor and his wife, Loretta, said they had never seen anything like it before. These are supposed to be sticks, rubber, and paper.
Right.
So, with no one in Corona wanting to help the poor guy, on July 7th, 1947, Mac Brazel takes his mysterious wreckage all the way to Roswell to see Sheriff George Wilcox. Well, of course, Sheriff Wilcox takes a look at the items Mac brought and has no idea what he's looking at, so Sheriff Wilcox, in turn, calls Colonel William Butch Blanchard, commander of the Roswell Army Airfield's 509th Composite Group, a group tasked with the operational deployment of nuclear weapons, formed during World War II. And see, this right here, this wreckage kind of chain of command, or more like chain of communication, from Mac Brazel to Roswell Sheriff George Wilcox to people at the Roswell Army Airfield, is the only thing attaching Roswell to the supposed UFO crash. The object never crashed in Roswell like most people think, like I thought. Its remains were brought there because really they had nowhere else to go. But still, Roswell lives in infamy as this UFO mecca. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, Colonel Blanchard. Now, Blanchard, too, is shown Mac Brazel's wreckage, and he has no idea what he's looking at. So Blanchard runs it up the flagpole to his superior, a man named General Roger W. Ramey, commander of the 8th Air Force in Fort Worth, Texas. Now, Colonel Blanchard also, at the same time, contacts Major Jesse Marcel, an intelligence officer from the Roswell Army Airfield. Mac Brazel convinces Major Jesse Marcel and Sheriff George Wilcox to venture all the way back to the crash site on Foster Ranch to investigate further and collect any remaining wreckage, which they did. And they were still left scratching their heads as to what exactly the wreckage was. So now we have 4 men. We have Mac Brazel. We have the intelligence officer, Jesse Marcel. We have William Blanchard, a man in charge of nuclear weapons, and a sheriff, all scratching their heads as to what this crashed object could be. And I think that says a lot about the wreckage, whether it was earthly or something else. If these men couldn't figure out that the wreckage was merely some tape, aluminum foil, rubber, and wooden sticks, as it was claimed by Mac Brazel originally, right? Either we were hiring some real shitty people into high-profile positions back in 47, which I don't think is the case.
Right.
Or the wreckage wasn't as straightforward as later reports would have us believe. Now, this is the last time civilians like Mac Brazel and Sheriff Wilcox are ever involved with the handling of the wreckage. From here on out, the wreckage is in total control of the U.S. government. After Brazel, Wilcox, and Marcel go to investigate the wreckage site on Foster Ranch, on July 8th, 1947, a man named Walter Haut, public information officer at the Roswell Army Airfield, drafts an official, infamous press release talking about a, quote, captured flying disc. The press picks up on Walter Haut's official statement. The story hits the newswire, and here's where things happen really fast. And, I apologize in advance, but I'm going to throw a lot of names, titles, and locations at you right now. So try to keep up. Immediately after Haut's captured disc story broke, a man named Brigadier General Thomas J. Dubois, who in 1947 was second in command of the United States Army Air Force at Fort Worth Field in Texas, receives a call from Major General Clements McCullen, Deputy Commander of Strategic Air Command in Washington, demanding to know what Dubois knew about the crash disc story coming out of Roswell. Dubois calls Colonel William Blanchard over in Roswell. Remember, Blanchard is commander of the Roswell Army Airfield's 509th Composite Group, that nuclear group. A government team goes out to the Foster Ranch crash site, and that's it. The wreckage is never out of government control again. From here, Colonel Blanchard is ordered to send the wreckage in a sealed container over to Brigadier General Thomas Dubois at Fort Worth Airfield in Texas. While the Foster Ranch wreckage is at the Fort Worth Airfield, some famous photographs are taken showing General Thomas Dubois, Major Jesse Marcel, and General Roger Ramey posing with the wreckage, which we'll get into a little later because there's definitely something up with these photos. Now, after the photos are taken at Fort Worth Airfield, the wreckage is then flown to Major General Clements McMullen in Washington, and ultimately McMullen sends the wreckage to Benjamin Chidlaw, commanding general of Air Material Command at Wright Field in Dayton, Ohio, what is now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, or as I like to call it, the real Area 51. And it's said that that's where the 1947 Foster Ranch UFO wreckage sits to this day.
Interesting.
Yes. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit more about the man who issued this famous press release about the crashed flying disc, Roswell Army Airfield Public Information Officer Walter Haut. Remember, we talked about Haut in the last episode, too, when we talked about the Haut Corso UFO crash site, the crash that was part of the 3 large explosions seen on the night of July 4th, 1947 by the mother and her 2 kids and by Jim Ragsdale. That's the Haut we're talking about here. Now, Haut, originally from Chicago, as we said, was public information officer at the Roswell Army Airfield back in 1947. According to Haut, it was under William Blanchard's orders that he, Haut, put out the infamous press release about the crashed flying disc. Haut said that Jesse Marcel, the intelligence officer, knew full well that the recovered debris was not of this world. And this is really interesting. In a sealed affidavit opened after Haut's death in December 2005, Haut wrote that after his press release on July 8th, William Blanchard took Haut to a hangar on the Roswell Army Airfield property. And there, he wrote that he saw an egg-shaped craft about 15 feet long, along with several small bodies about 4 feet tall with large heads. In his affidavit, Haut also wrote that there were actually 2 impact sites, one where the debris was found by Mac Brazel on Foster Ranch, and another site about 40 miles north of Roswell, where the egg-shaped craft and the bodies he saw were found. Now, I'm positive this is the alternate crash site we talked about in the last episode. So yeah, Walter Haut, incredibly interesting dude. All right, so where were we? Oh yeah, so Haut puts out the captured disc press release on orders from William Blanchard. From there, the very next day, so July 8th, 1947, a local newspaper called the Roswell Daily Record picked up on Haut's press release and ran a front-page story with an incredible headline which read, and this is a quote, "RAAF captures flying saucer on ranch in Roswell region," end quote. And the news story contained a rather curious sentence, which has driven people nuts for decades. And the sentence read, quote, the intelligence office of the 509th Bombardment Group at Roswell Army Airfield announced that the field has come into the possession of a flying saucer, end quote. And that was it. As far as anyone was concerned, this UFO crash was the real deal. No question about it. The Associated Press got wind of the Roswell Daily Record story and blasted the sensational news across the wire. Now take a listen to this. This is an actual Associated Press news release from July 8th, 1947, talking about the downed UFO. Now, Oscar, can you cue that up, please?
Clip time. Let's do it.
Headline edition, July 8th, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.
Now, obviously, by this point, people of Roswell and the surrounding areas, hell, the world, thanks to the Associated Press, were abuzz, wondering just what the hell the crashed object could be. Was it an actual flying saucer, like something from space? Was it a Russian aircraft? Could our Cold War enemies have actually made it into our airspace with some new secret technology that we were unaware of and unprepared for? Are we in danger?
Yeah.
Now imagine you're an average U.S. citizen during this time period. Your country is just coming out of World War II. And the nation
everywhere.
What's that?
Communism. Right?
But exactly.
Yeah.
World War II has just ended. You're on the heels of the Truman Doctrine, which is set up to fight communism.
Yeah.
Now suddenly there are news reports from trusted sources like the one you just heard talking about flying saucers. What are you thinking? How are you feeling? Hell, America lost its mind when people heard Orson Welles' rendition of H.G. Wells' The War of the Worlds over their radios in 1938. People actually thought Martians and their alien war machines were heading to New Jersey to destroy it.
Yeah.
And people literally panicked in the streets and rioted. Now here in real world 1947, trusted news sources were telling the public about an honest-to-God flying saucer. How crazy that must have been. But then things got even stranger. Hearing the news coming out of the wire and given the Roswell Daily Record news story, in response on July 8th, government scientists flooded the Foster Ranch crash site. And see, this, like I said, this stuff happens really quick. So on July 8th, when that story broke, government scientists flooded the Foster Ranch crash site and soon after held a press conference of their own. And it turns out, according to the scientists, the downed object wasn't a UFO at all. Instead, what crashed near Roswell was a weather balloon. Local reporters were even shown debris, right? Local reporters were even shown debris taken from the crash site, like rubber, wood, tape, aluminum foil, proving that the object was earthly and was indeed a weather balloon. Move along. Nothing to see here. The Roswell Daily Record quickly printed a retraction story on the evening of July 8th. 2 stories, same day. 2 totally conflicting articles. So the Roswell Daily Record quickly printed a retraction story on the evening of July 8th, which told the scientist's story that the crashed object was not a flying saucer at all, folks. It was just a simple weather balloon. But really, at the end of the day, it was too late. The lion had been let out of the cage, and Roswell, New Mexico would, from that point on, be synonymous with UFOs, aliens, and government cover-ups.
They had some tourism.
Huge tourism. Hell, I want to go, you know?
Yeah, I went there as a kid.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Do you have pictures or anything?
If there is, my mom might have it. I was a child. I definitely didn't take any pictures myself, but I do remember very vividly a lot of well, not one thing I remember more than anything was a restaurant or a diner with alien stuff everywhere, like everywhere.
Wow.
It was an alien heavy place.
Kind of like the little Alien when we went to Nevada.
Kind of like that, yeah. The menus, the door had like aliens on it. Everything was all little green men.
Definitely a crash a cash grab centered around, like you said, the little green men.
Yes.
Absolutely. I'll make it there one day. I want to get back to the desert. It was fun. Okay. Now, here's where I'm going to instruct the listeners. Go to the show notes. Listeners, please go check out the show notes because I want to talk about the famous wreckage photos I briefly mentioned a little bit ago. In the show notes, I have pictures showing General Thomas Dubois, Major Jesse Marcel, and General Roger Ramey posing with the Foster Ranch wreckage. So you can see for yourself what the wreckage supposedly looked like after the government got involved. You have to keep in mind, once the government got their hands on the wreckage, we have no idea what happens after that. Some claim that during transportation of the wreckage from the Roswell Army Airfield to Fort Worth Airfield in Texas, the wreckage was switched. And the real wreckage went straight to Major General McClellan over in Washington and then off to Wright Field over in Dayton, Ohio. So in other words, what we're seeing in the famous photographs I've included in the show notes is not the real wreckage. Maybe. And it's when these photos are taken and published that the weather balloon story really takes shape. That, in fact, what crashed at Foster Ranch was not a flying disc at all. It was a simple, run-of-the-mill weather balloon because we could see it. We could see in the photos that it isn't a flying disc at all, right? Now, again, go to the show notes to see what I'm about to talk about because there's a few things people have pointed out over the years about these famous photos of Dubois, Marcel, and Ramey posing with the wreckage. Now, first, and probably the easiest to spot, is the fact that the photos are clearly staged. The photos are taken in a controlled environment on the grounds of Fort Worth Airfield in General Ramey's office. And there's only a single civilian photographer involved. His name was James Bond Johnson. And yes, his name was James Bond. A rookie, I know, a rookie reporter for the Fort Worth Star newspaper. Now, in the photograph, again, staged, the military men are clearly posing with the wreckage in such a way as to say, look, see, it's nothing but a weather balloon or a radar reflector, depending on which story you read, while they're smirking at each other. And looking at it in this light, it's really kind of funny when you think about it. So, number one, the photo is staged. Number two, in the photograph of Jesse Marcel by himself holding the wreckage, you could see right behind him the bag, the weather balloon or the radar reflector he's holding, maybe, was packaged in. Remember, he's supposed to be holding the actual Roswell wreckage. But right behind him is a fresh, clean bag the weather balloon or radar detector would have been packaged in. Mm-hmm. Now, this bag certainly would not have been found at the Foster Ranch wreckage site. So why is it there? This leads people to believe that right before the staged photo shoot, someone took a device out of its carrying bag, whether it was the weather balloon or a reflector, unfurled it, crinkled it all up to give it that freshly crashed look, and then proceeded to take the famous photos. Now, of course, I have no way of telling if this is the case. Hell, reports differ as to what the object in the photo really is, but the bag being there is curious. Now, number three, and probably the most mysterious item in these photos, is what's called the Ramey memo. Now, again, check the show notes, listeners, so you can follow along. There's a photo of both Roger Ramey and Thomas Dubois, where Dubois is holding a piece of foil, and he's kind of looking over at Ramey, who's kneeling down, and Dubois is smirking. Now, in Ramey's hand is a piece of paper, what's come to be known as the Ramey memo. So much time and effort has gone into trying to decipher what exactly is teletyped on that piece of paper. Now, it's a photograph taken in 1947, of course, so it's black and white and it's pretty low res, but that hasn't stopped people, scientists, laboratories even, from trying to figure out what's on that letter. In fact, the University of Texas at Arlington Library houses a special collection called Roswell UFO Incident. The library is currently, today, offering a $10,000 reward to anyone who can successfully interpret the memo in Ramey's hand. Listeners, can you make out what it says and collect the $100K, the $10K? Let us know. Now, as I said, some serious scientific research has gone into trying to read this memo. And words like balloons, Fort Worth, disc, and victims, to some people, could be seen in the memo. Now, one study done in 1998, using a huge blown-up version of the memo along with some sophisticated software, was able to translate almost the entire memo. If the software is correct, then the memo translates like this, and there are missing pieces that the software just couldn't hit on. Now, here's what the memo might say. Quote, as the 4 hours, the victims of the at Fort Worth, Texas, the crash story 40984 acknowledges emergency powers are needed, Site 2, southwest of Magdalena, New Mexico. Safe talk for meaning of story and mission. Weather balloons sent on the and land rover cruise. Signed Temple. End quote.
That's not vague at all. That's not.
I know.
Yeah.
And it sounds ridiculous to read it like this with the missing pieces, but that's what it says.
Right.
And if it's true, there's some pretty enticing words and phrases in this translation of the Ramey memo, like victims of the, and
right.
crash story, and emergency powers are needed, or for meaning of story and mission.
It seems like an alert, like a notice, an alert, right?
Yes, something's going on here, right?
Yeah.
Victims, what victim? Oh my God, the possibilities, right? Now, I specifically find interesting the words "victims of the," as I believe it refers directly to an affidavit given by Walter Haut, right, the one that was unsealed after he died.
Yeah,
about an experience he had concerning the bodies recovered from the Foster Ranch crash site. And I have to put a special note in here. The photos in the show notes of Ramey's memo and the photos of Ramey, Dubois, and Marcel holding the supposed wreckage are courtesy of Fort Worth Star Telegram Photograph Collection, Special Collections, the University of Texas at Arlington Library, Arlington, Texas. I got to give credit where credit is due, right?
You'd be surprised how many little museums and things of that nature for like a given place where things happen, especially like this. They have like interesting collections, interesting evidence just sitting there, and on display for locals to just visit.
Incredible.
Yeah,
I want to see this special collection the university has. That's got to be pretty cool.
It's got to be pretty cool. Yeah, you might need like written permission, but I think we can get it. He's got to go there.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Can't now because I got the corona, but
right.
One day, Oscar, one day we will get there. Roswell and Skinwalker. That's where we're headed.
Oh man. Yeah.
So what happened out on Foster Ranch in the deserts of New Mexico back in 1947? Did Mac Brazel really discover evidence of a crashed UFO? Were high-ranking members of the U.S. military really so ignorant as to not recognize a simple weather balloon when they saw one? Was there a cover-up to hide the true origins of the wreckage? Because something did crash. The crash was a real thing. Now, first, the object did come from the sky. And for all intents and purposes, it was unidentifiable. So it is a UFO by definition. So the answer to the first question is yes, a UFO by definition did crash.
Like technically, right?
Right.
Yes.
Now, as to whether or not the government men were really too ignorant to recognize the wreckage for what it was, and whether or not there was a cover-up, here's where we have to talk about a little secret government program from 1945 called Project Mogul. That's M-O-G-U-L if you want to look it up. You see, Project Mogul was a top-secret government program designed to spy on our Cold War enemy, Russia, using fairly sophisticated high-altitude balloons to listen to the enemy. Much like sound waves catching the right area underwater and traveling for thousands of miles, think about when we talked about the bloop. Remember that episode?
Yes.
It was believed the same principle could be applied up in the air, in the stratosphere. Now, the goal of Mogul was to send a train of neoprene balloons that could maintain altitude, along with a listening device, a transmitter, and some other gadgets and reflectors to help track the balloon up into the stratosphere over Mother Russia and listen for things. Things like missile launches or nuclear bomb tests. The sounds would be picked up by Mogul microphones, sent to a receiving station by the transmitter, and then the sounds would be deciphered by Mogul operatives. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing with Mogul. The materials used to make the Mogul balloons were not top secret. Mogul balloons were made of the same material regular weather balloons were made of. It was the ultimate mission of Project Mogul that was top secret, the spying and the recording part. So the military men that came in contact with the Foster Ranch wreckage might have been ignorant to Mogul's ultimate goal, but they certainly wouldn't have been ignorant to the wreckage being that of a weather balloon, especially Jesse Marcel, the intelligence man. So that says to me that whatever the wreckage was something these highly trained men had never seen before. It wasn't rubber, foil, and sticks, in other words. Another possibility is that the men knew exactly what the wreckage was, a Mogul balloon, especially intelligence man Marcel. But because ranking military men are bound by secrecy, especially if they're in intelligence, a story was quickly spun up to throw off citizens and the press and keep them ignorant about the government's new top-secret spy program, Project Mogul. So in this scenario, the military men were simply doing their jobs, and a UFO was easier to talk about than a top-secret government project. That's a cover-up, folks, right? And believe me, stories from this famous crash go on and on and on. More and more people get involved. High-ranking members of the U.S. military, the Pentagon, multiple military bases, top-secret memos. Top-secret memos like the Twinning Memo, issued on September 23, 1947, by General Nathan Twinning, U.S. Air Force Chief of Staff and head of Air Material Command for the United States Air Force, and later chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff at the Pentagon.
Damn.
And who appeared on the cover of Time magazine on February 8th.
As what?
And February 8th, 1954. I tried to look up that specific.
Yeah.
You could get the cover from that day showing twinning on the cover, but I couldn't get the article, and I searched high and low to see what it was about.
That's interesting.
So this is a decorated man, if there was ever a decorated man, right? Now, his memo, the Twinning Memo, states, and I'm kind of paraphrasing here because it's immensely long. It states that, yes, the flying discs being reported throughout the United States during this time period, like the examples we gave in the last episode, including the Roswell incident and the Kenneth Arnold incident, are real and not visionary or fictitious, and that the flying discs were either circular or oval in shape with a dome top and a flat bottom, that the discs were capable of pulling aerial maneuvers that known American and foreign aircraft could not accomplish.
Right.
And that it's likely these unknown craft are either controlled manually, automatically, or remotely. Twinning urged investigation into the flying discs being seen all over the U.S., which led to the formation of Project Sign at the end of 1947, which turned into Project Grudge, and then into Project Blue Book, all three of which we'll touch on briefly in the next episode. Or how about the testimony given by General Arthur E. Exon, commanding general of Wright Field, now Wright-Patterson Air Force Base over in Dayton, who said, and again, I'm paraphrasing, that Roswell wreckage brought to Wright Field underwent numerous chemical, stress, compression, and flex tests, and that the material was like nothing his, General Exxon, scientists had ever seen before, and that everyone from the White House on down knew that what was found outside of Roswell was not of this world 24 hours after finding it. In his testimony, General Exxon also confirms that there was indeed a second impact site, and that he was told a craft and bodies were recovered from the second site. And of course, there's the testimony given by W. Glenn Dennis, who claimed that he was a 22-year-old mortician at the Ballard Funeral Home in Roswell in July 1947. Dennis alleges that on July 7, 1947, he received a series of phone calls at the Ballard Funeral Home where he worked from the mortuary affairs officer at the Roswell Army Airfield. Dennis said that the mortuary officer inquired about the availability of child-sized caskets, as well as asking about procedures for preserving bodies that have been laying out in the elements. Yeah.
Little green men, right? Caskets?
Exactly.
Kind of. Huh.
Now, the long and short with Dennis, at a hospital located on Roswell Army Airfield, he claims to have seen what he called canoe-shaped pieces of wreckage with strange bluish-purplish lettering on them in the back of an ambulance guarded by military police. Dennis said he had his life threatened when he asked questions, and that a nurse he knew who was in the room while preliminary autopsies were being performed on what the nurse described as 3 very mangled black little bodies with large flexible heads and concave eyes and noses mysteriously died in a plane crash during a quote-unquote training mission, shortly after telling Dennis what she saw in the autopsy room. I'm telling you, man, this stuff goes deep.
Yeah.
Now, it must be mentioned here, because I've talked about recovered bodies a few times in the last episodes, that the U.S. military, I want to tell you that the U.S. military was using what's called anthropomorphic models, what today we call crash test dummies, in high-altitude freefall tests roughly during this time period. Human-looking dummies, outfitted with various sensors, would be dropped from high-altitude balloons to gauge the fall's impact on the human body. The dummies were bald and completely hairless, and typically dressed in a single-colored one-piece suit, adorned with straps or tape of a different color, kind of like a typical jumpsuit an Air Force member might wear, like a flight suit.
Yeah.
Now, the anthropomorphic dummies started being dropped in New Mexico in May of 1950, but earlier versions of the anthropomorphic dummy were used as early as World War I. So, were the recovered bodies that high-ranking members of the U.S. military spoke about with Roswell and other incidents that we talked about last episode, were they simply misidentified anthropomorphic dummies? And I find it hard to believe, again, that highly trained individuals could make that mistake, but who knows? Right? The dummy theory could also explain why government crews seem to be on the ready to get to the supposed UFO crash sites with the quickness, already armed with removal equipment and gear to facilitate the removal of crash debris, because they already knew where the stuff was supposed to land because they were tests. Again, who knows? And like I said, this factoid list regarding the Roswell incident is incredibly long and complex. And I have to move on from Roswell because there's one more thing that we want to talk about tonight, right? The Betty and Barney Hill abduction story Oscar's going to give to us.
Yes.
So for now, we're putting the Roswell incident to bed and moving on to the Betty and Barney Hill story.
Yes, let's do that. All right. Let's see. Me pulling up notes and saying things. Okay, here we go. Now, there's 2 titles to this story that I found circling, through my researching. One is called The Hill Abduction, or it's called the Zeta Reticuli Incident. Have you ever heard that title for it?
I actually have.
You have? Okay.
I've come across it.
Yeah.
When we were, you and I were kicking around the idea for these UFO episodes of trying to get a hierarchy, or at least a concise list of alien species that are out there. Do you remember this?
That's right. Well, this one's titled after that. And I will explain why it's called Zeta Reticuli Incident and not just the Hill Abduction or the Betty and Barney Hill Abduction story.
Oh, cool. Okay. I'm ready.
But because I found that interesting, too, because I knew that it was related to some sort of race of aliens or something. But that's why I was curious. Why are they calling it this? Yes. We're going to find out here. Now, I will be telling the story chronologically, but as you'll soon understand, it'll be information that it was discovered by the Hills and the people around them who were trying to help.
Okay.
you'll see that this story and the night in question unfolds quite dramatically weeks and years after the incident. This story is also very personal and very invasive to Betty and Barney Hill. So let's set the stage a little bit here. The time is 1961, and the place, or the state, I should say, is New Hampshire. How do you spell that? How do you pronounce New Hampshire? Did I say it right? New Hampshire?
No, I say it just like you did the first time, New Hampshire.
Yeah, it just sounds strange coming out of my mouth. It's a strange state. It's like Massachusetts. Sometimes I fuck that up and, how do you say that stupid state? Anyway.
Stupid state. We love people from Massachusetts.
You know what I'm saying? That name, Jesus.
Especially Anna Kendrick.
Anna but that's not hard to say. It's not like it feels weird in your mouth,
Oh, well, you know what? I'm going to stop right here.
Yeah, you are going to stop. Yeah, I was going to say, did I just open up a can of something?
Yes, because Anna Kendrick is now out of my mind. Okay.
So this couple, beyond their story, which is engrossing and fascinating and truly interesting, they were also, interesting and fascinating and polarizing for other reasons. And that is that Barney they're both dead now, was a black person and Betty was a white person. It's like not the first or anything like that, but it was an early on an interracial couple in an age when this was unheard of.
Oh, completely taboo.
It's completely taboo in some areas, probably more south, but everywhere, and maybe even more so in that in New Hampshire where they lived, in Portsmouth. I mean, Portsmouth is not exactly a town known for great integration or anything like that. Especially at the time. So it goes without saying that this is like a fascinating encountering thing to happen to a couple who I'm sure have grown up with a lot of interesting tales and interesting stories and encountering people and so on in their lives already. Barney Hill was a United States Postal Service worker. He worked quite a lot of time, actually, from 1922 to 60. No, let's see. When did he quit? I don't remember. I had the number here, but he was a U.S. postal worker for a long time. And Betty was a social worker. She was active at the local Unitarian congregation, which I guess is religious. And they were also members of the NAACP and community leaders regarding those things. And they were all about the local, U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. They were very prominent in their areas for all those things. And they were not like super famous about it. They just did work locally, community-wise, in awareness for civil rights and all that jazz. So they were really cool. I just want to bring that up. On September 19th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill were driving to Portsmouth from Montreal, Canada, along Route 3. Now, the route itself is interesting because I got a lot of conflicting things, but I'm going to say Route 3 now and just going to say that forever because there's so many weird things. No, they took Route 2, not 3, and people had different opinions on that. They also were traveling with their dog, a dachshund called Delcy.
Oh.
Interesting name for a dog. Never heard of that name before, Delcy. The time was around 10:30 at night, and Barney was driving. They were coming home from a vacation, and this vacation was like sorely needed for them. They actually considered it like a late honeymoon because both were very hard workers. They both had a lot of hours, and they both had a lot of stress behind their work, and they needed a break. Finally, they were managed to save up. Actually, they didn't take that much money, but they managed to save up time to take vacation from their jobs to finally get a honeymoon going. And this was some time after their wedding. It's not like right after or anything, but I want to mention that. Yeah. The following is according to an article called Captured, the Betty and Barney Hill UFO Experience, as well as a book titled The Interrupted Journey. Betty saw something strange in the sky, a bright point to be exact, and that this point, which she initially believed to be a falling star, moved from below the moon and then upward to west of the moon. The bright light moved erratically, then it would get bigger and brighter. Falling star my ass. Betty urged her husband to stop the car to get a better look. At a picnic area just south of Twin Mountain, they stopped, and Barney used this opportunity to walk Delcy. Through binoculars, Betty was able to track the strange spacecraft gliding across the moon from her angle. She noticed the craft had different colored lights on it. When Barney saw it, he reasoned that it must have been an airplane heading to Montreal from Vermont. He quickly disposed of that idea when he saw the spacecraft had suddenly turned and veered towards him and Betty.
Shit.
The Hills got back in their car and got out of there. Their journey home was a little slow here, though. Their slow journey home from the picnic area took them to a narrow mountain pass called Franconia Notch, passing landmarks such as the Old Man of the Mountain and a town called Indian Head before somehow arriving at their home. I'm going to say this little point here. The Old Man in the Mountain is, you know how we have those weird landmarks, kind of like, well, Rushmore is man-made, but like, you know, how you see faces, like in the faces in the clouds, you see shapes in clouds that, you know, like a rabbit, you know, whatever. It's
Sure.
like this, but for a mountain. And it looks like an old man on the side. And you can see it when you drive by it. That's why it's called the Old Man in the Mountain.
Okay.
Anyway, so they arrived at their home, slowly but surely. The couple got home around dawn, and they felt strange. Both experienced odd sensations and impulses that they could not explain until later. Both of their watches stopped working. Barney's 1957 Chevrolet Bel Air had something weird on it.
He had a 57 Chevy?
Yes.
That lucky son of a gun.
Yeah, I guess so.
He probably paid $200 for it, too.
Yeah, I have no idea. I didn't check that kind of thing before. Yeah. But no, I don't know how. I saw pictures of the car. It looks awesome. I want one.
Oh, yeah, 57 Chevy is like my dream.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, here's the marking that I would want to put on your Bel Air if you ever get one. There were glimmering concentric circles seemingly etched on the trunk.
Oh.
The circles were like shiny spots. A simple compass experiment only proved to be weirder. The needle of the compass would spin rapidly when close to the spots and would like power back down after you leave it for a short distance. Here's other strange stuff that happened to them personally. Betty decided on keeping the luggage near the rear of the house instead of the front, like always. After waking from her first nap post-UFO incident, she noticed her dress was inexplicably torn at the zipper, lining, and hem as she went to put it away in her closet. Betty also noticed a weird pinkish powder on the dress that blew away with the movement of the dress, you know? And that part, I don't know where to even begin. What is that about? I have no idea, but it went away and no test or anything about that. So you could cut it here, but she did recall a pinkish powder. No idea what's about. Seeing as that the dress was beyond repair, Betty threw the dress away. But strangely, later on, she was compelled to take it out of the trash and return it to the closet. Barney was dealing with his own brand of oddities. The strap for his binoculars were torn, and he could not remember how. The front of his best dress shoes were scraped, and he did not know how. Barney was also compelled to check his genitals for something unusual, but found nothing wrong. It's safe to say that the Hills went through something strange, otherworldly, and just wrong. They felt wrong. The Hills took long showers to remove any possibility of contamination, and the freakiest thing of all is that at some point they realized that a 5-hour car ride home from Montreal took 7 hours. These are the telltale signs of a time loss. Further reflection on the evening told Betty and Barney that their memories after the picnic area was fragmented. Together, they managed to recall a few details after they saw the spacecraft heading in their direction. The following account comes from much of the same sources, originating mainly through Betty, who we'll see has a firmer grasp on her consciousness. Let's go back to Franconia Notch. Franconia Notch is a pass, like a road, right? Like a pass through for those who wish to get through White Mountains in New Hampshire.
Okay.
The Hills were driving through the pass slowly, keeping the UFO in sight as much as possible. Betty described the craft's length to be about 60 feet as it glided past the granite cliff face of the Old Man in the Mountain, which is about 40 feet long. The craft was rotating as it passed. In the night sky, the spacecraft would erratically flit all over, but making absolutely no sound. About a mile past Indian Head, the couple said that the UFO quickly descended towards them, causing the abrupt stop. Like it caused the car to stop because of the way it was swooping down towards them.
Wow.
The craft hovered around 80 feet above their car, covering the field of view through the windshield. Think of how big that is.
Oh, it's Horrifying. I'm horrified.
Oh, right. Aliens. That's right. I forget.
Hate it.
You're not gonna like the story at all. Barney got out of the car and walked closer to the UFO, carrying, I believe he got a jack from the trunk of his car. He was looking for an item like a weapon, right? Okay. And his binoculars too. Barney claimed to have seen several humanoid figures peering from the windows of the spacecraft at him. Now, simultaneously, all but one of the figures walked away from view, roughly 10 of them, to some side panel on the craft. The one remaining, seemingly staring at Barney, somehow telepathically communicated with him, telling him to, quote, "stay where you are and keep looking," unquote. Barney recalled the humanoid forms were wearing black caps and black robes. The UFO got closer as a red platform of some sort, you can describe it like a red wings almost, came down, closest to Barney than the car or Betty. Despite being human-shaped, Barney felt that they weren't. At this point, Barney seemed to have snapped out of it, and running back to the car, told Betty that they were going to abduct them. At high speed, Barney tore out of there as the UFO shifted about in midair. From a book titled The UFO Book, a series of beeping and buzzing sounds rhythmically bounced off the trunk of the car, causing vibrations. Betty and Barney immediately started getting dulling sensations, like a lower shift of gears in their consciousness. Cut to another series of buzzing and beeping and vibrations, but this time those things regained their consciousness, and the Hills found themselves in their car on the road roughly 35 miles south of the previous memory. At this point, they were able to kind of recall an unplanned turn, encountering a roadblock of some sort, and seeing a fiery orb in the sky. Regardless, the Hills went home after that. But the story is far from over. 2 days later, on September 21st, 1961, Betty phoned a friend they knew at Pease Air Force Base, stationed in Portsmouth at the time to report what happened to them. That initial story had details withheld, but a prime worry, beyond just notifying military officials, is possible radiation the Hills might have come into contact. They had this fear, hence the long showers and so on. This friend they telephoned was named Major Paul Henderson. In the initial report, Henderson asserted that the couple must have mistaken Jupiter or strange optics in the air for a UFO. This changed soon after, when Henderson found that the report matched strange radar activity found by two separate Air Force installations nearby the incident.
Ooh, wow.
I could not find that report personally, unless I was going to delve into the following sentence I'm about to say, which are, these reports were logged into what became one of the most popular government programs that Jay and I know as Project Blue Book. It's one of the many types of reports they managed to collect for that project.
Wow.
Yeah.
Was the Betty and Barney Hill story?
Yes, this initial story, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
Betty started checking out books at the library about UFOs. She discovered the works of retired Marine Corps aviator Donald E. Kehoe. This man wrote several books, some fictional, but not all of them, about UFOs and strange sightings and experiences. He wrote an article that turned into a book called Flying Saucers Are Real by 1950, where he spends where he speaks of government involvement and misinterpretation, as well as the accounts of a Kenneth Arnold sighting several UFOs. Yeah.
We know that one.
In that book. Yeah. In 1956, Kehoe co-founded the National Investigations Committee on Aerial Phenomena, or NICAP. NICAP consisted of several pros, ex-military and scientists, to find some answers and gather information on UFOs. Throughout its heyday in the 1950s and 60s, NICAP was the largest and most prominent civilian organization regarding UFOs in the U.S. And this guy was a co-founder in it.
Wow.
On September 26th, Betty wrote to Donald Kehoe. She detailed everything her and her husband remembered about the evening, including the humanoid figures. She didn't sugarcoat it this time. A supposed 6-hour interview was made by the Hills about their experiences, but I couldn't find all the notes for the interview itself. So keep that in mind. Everything was described as, this is what happened roughly. In it, they talked about everything I've mentioned about the night of September 19th. Barney asserted that he had a mental block on portions of the evening that he believed were things he did not want to remember. The person sent to do the interview was a man named Walter Webb, who became assistant director at NICAP and was known to be a very skeptical man about abduction stories. So maybe a perfect guy to do the interview, right?
Yeah.
He suggested the couple to go back to the scene of the incident and retrace steps. But regardless, he did interview them. He interviewed them together and separately to find any details if anything changed in their stories. Quote, this is from him now. It is the opinion of this investigator, after questioning these people for over 6 hours and studying their reactions and personalities during that time, that they were telling the truth. And the incident occurred exactly as reported, except for some minor uncertainties and technicalities that must be tolerated in any such observation where human judgment is involved, i.e., exact time and length of visibility, apparent sizes of objects and occupants, distance and height of object, etc. Although their occupations do not especially qualify the witnesses as trained scientific observers, I was impressed by their intelligence, apparent honesty, and obvious desire to get at the facts and to underplay, the most sensational aspects of the sighting, unquote.
Wow.
So pretty good, right? Well, pretty good. I mean, pretty bad for them. I guess that's real, but pretty good.
No, yeah. I mean, they're validating.
Right.
Of course. Yeah, definitely.
Right. The notion of hypnosis was bandied about for the first time throughout this interview.
Oh.
This interview would also famously cite the loss of time that would become more or less a staple in future alien abduction stories. I'm not saying this is the first time, but this is one of the first.
Okay.
Where time loss is a big deal. The interview and previous reports didn't help shine a light on what exactly happened to the Hills or why. It won't be till years later that some measure of answers are revealed. All right, so continue the story here. 10 days after the incident, Betty Hill began having nightmares. These particular set of dreams occurred over a period of 5 days and became the most vivid Betty experienced in her life. Details from the nightmares consisted of being abducted onto an alien spacecraft and medical procedures done to her and to Barney. Details like being held down, probed, experimented on. She dreamt being taken on board the spacecraft where she and Barney got separated to be examined. She dreamt of her anguish at being separated from her husband, and that while a figure used telepathy to speak to Barney, one of them spoke English to her. Yeah, super weird. One of her dreams had her pick out a book in the alien spaceship, that it was given to her. She asked the one that spoke English to her where they were. A star map was pulled, and it etched into Betty's memory vividly. Other details were written about her dreams too. Betty being escorted about the ship, a disagreement between all the other aliens or humanoid figures about whether or not to let her keep the book she grabbed, right? Being told that she would one day remember the whole evening, and finally being led to the car with Barney, waiting for the spacecraft to leave before driving home. All this came in these dreams. The dreams never went away, really, but these vivid nightmares started Betty's quest to write them down and keep a diary. Barney, on the other hand, didn't experience such dreams, and overall tried dismissing what happened to them on September 19th. The Hills would take that advice that Walter Webb gave them in the interview. They would revisit the past in White Mountain to try to remember more clearly in the following months after the incident.
Okay.
The trips were fruitless, though. Always the same curtain of darkness descended for Barney after the critical moment at Indian Head. Always the same veil of darkness obscured Betty's memory after hearing the series of beeps and buzzes. Cut to 2 years later now. Betty's nightmares never stopped, and Barney had developed an ulcer and almost crippling anxiety that grew each day since September 19th. Damn. The Hills were sure that a big reason for this haunting trauma is the gap in time they haven't accounted for. Betty and Barney sought help. I'm going to skip a few steps here because there's a lot of more information I'm kind of excluding here, but I'm going to skip a few steps here in the Hill timeline to get to a prominent person that helps them out.
Okay.
Dr. Benjamin Simon, is a graduate of Stanford University and the Washington University of Medicine. While training in psychiatry and neurology, Dr. Simon became proficient in techniques and procedures of hypnosis. He found it quite helpful in World War II in the treatment of military psychiatric disorders.
Oh, interesting.
Mm-hmm. He started starting in the general dispensary in New York and moving forward to chief of neuropsychiatry and executive officer at Mason General Hospital. This hospital was the Army's chief psychiatric center for World War II, or during World War II. His service ended in 1943, and Dr. Simon moved to civilian psychiatry, keeping his interest in the techniques he learned close at hand. On December 14th, 1963, Betty and Barney Hill met with Dr. Simon. Some would say that what follows is the prime reason the Hill abduction case is so popular, citing hypnotherapy as a means to account for the loss of time in abduction victims.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So let's get into the sessions here. This is what a lot of people call the meat and potatoes of the whole thing. In the morning of January 4th, 1964, the Hills arrived at the doctor's office for the first session. Dr. Simon decided to take Barney first, hoping to regress him to the night of September 19th and have him reveal details of the trip. Since the trance would provide details of marked clarity, and since there was an expectation that Barney would bridge an amnesia gap under hypnosis, the blocking off of his memory after each session would let Betty to give her own story later on without being influenced by Barney. This is the method that Dr. Simon used.
Okay.
I'm going to paraphrase and quote portions of the transcript from kind of here on out here. It's kind of complicated. And I should also say that there was, famously, there's 3 sessions for Betty and for Barney through each that he did in regards to that night. Not to say that there wasn't other sessions, like precursor sessions, to see if they were, first of all, susceptible to hypnotherapy, because some people are less or more susceptible to it, like naturally, explaining certain things about them, having them recount certain things while they're lucid, and then when they're in hypnosis, recounting to see if they are accurate. So all this stuff happened already. So I'm kind of skipping a little bit in the sessions.
Okay.
So I'm just going to put that out there because it's not just like, oh yeah, day 1, here you go, hypnotherapy. No, well, it doesn't work that way.
No, good point. Okay, good.
Yeah. So Barney described the UFO as a pancake and the rows of windows on the sides. He talks about being scared. Sorry, not scarred. He talks about being scared, but not wanting to show it to Betty to keep her calm. He describes the urge to look through the binoculars to look at the UFO when he didn't want to once he got out of the car. He said he felt like a rabbit. This is weird. Quote, "What do you mean by that?" The doctor is asking. Here's what Barney says. "I was hunting for rabbits in Virginia, and this cute little bunny went into a bush that wasn't very big. And my cousin Marge was on one side and I was on the other with a hat. And the poor little bunny thought it was safe. And it tickled me because he was just hiding behind a little stalk, which meant security to him. When I pounced on him and threw my hat on him and captured the poor little bunny who thought he was safe. Funny is what I thought out in the field. I feel like a rabbit," unquote. He's describing how he felt that night of the September 19th.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's compared to that memory. He hooked that memory quite a lot in the session, is from what I read. Barney said that he knew that the figure staring at him from the UFO was telling him that he's not that rabbit. That he wasn't going to get hurt like the rabbit did. He said he wasn't told this, just that he knew. Barney described the eyes of these humanoid beings as slanted beyond anything he's seen before, tracing his finger in the air during the session.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. There are many details that are disclosed during these sessions. Barney describes people under a very bright light, but not daylight, that he initially thought were military leaders, but also not really. That he was operated on in the spaceship. Barney said that the operation felt similar to when he got his tonsils removed, the bright lights and uncomfortable feeling. He mentioned how his groin felt cold, the coldness of surgical metals touching him.
Uh-oh.
There's a lot covered in these sessions, too much really. I'm going to insert a clip of one of the sessions that Dr. Simon recorded. In it, Barney talks about much of what I've described already and how the information really just goes on and on.
Guys, because if I don't, I'll just keep staying there.
Did you hear him tell you this?
Oh, no, he didn't say it.
You felt he said it.
I know.
You know he
Just
did.
there, yeah. Just stay there, he's saying to me. Yes,
All right.
I'll take in my head. Just
All right.
pull the binoculars away. God, give me strength.
All right.
Pull them down. Run! Pull the binoculars down and run. God! It says, my God, give me strength. I gotta get away. Oh! Buddy! We gotta get away, buddy!
All right. Calm down. Calm down.
I'm trying. I
Calm
gotta
down.
get away.
How could you be sure he was telling you this? Calm down. You're still asleep. How could you be sure he was telling you this?
His eyes. His eyes. I've never seen his eyes before.
But you said they were friendly. You said they were friendly.
Oh, no. Not the leaders. I said only the one looking over his shoulder
Oh, I see. The leader was
was
the...
friendly.
How did you know the other one was the leader?
Because everybody moved. Everyone was standing there looking at me, but everybody moved to these levers or in the back, or they went to this big board. It looked like a board. And only this one with the black shiny jacket and the scarf stayed at the window. I'm driving.
You going back into the car now?
Yes,
You put down your binoculars, did you?
I got him down.
Yes. And you got into the car. Did you speak to Betty?
Getting a hold of myself. I'm saying, hold to myself. Now, don't panic. You got wait. Fortitude. You can drive the car. And I hope it.
Yeah. So I hope people can hear it because it's actually old quality, but I found it pretty understandable. And honestly, you could pick any 3 minutes, and it's similar to this, the same vibe. He's talking about the same things. He's describing much of the same things. Just the next one over. It's really interesting. Yeah,
It is
super.
interesting, terrifying. A few times since we've been talking, I felt
what are you thinking? Yeah.
I'm listening in rapture because I'm not entirely familiar with the story, but I've broken out in goosebumps a few times as you're talking.
Oh man,
That rabbit thing,
Yeah.
the rabbit
Yeah.
thing that got me. I goosebumped up on that one.
Good. I'm glad I put it in there because I was like that. Yeah, that rabbit thing is juicy.
Yeah. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Betty's sessions corroborated much of the same events when she and Barney were together. When separated, on the September 19th I'm talking about, Betty would go on describing her own weird happenings, like her navel being pierced by one of the humanoids, and that they would told her that it was to check if she was pregnant.
Huh.
Here comes a little bit of a long quote. Betty, oh, it was a long needle. I don't know. I didn't look, but I would say the needle was 4 inches long, 6 maybe. Something like a tube was attached to it. They didn't leave it in very long, just for a second. The doctor asks, what kind of pain was it? She responds, all I could think of was a knife. Then I was grateful to the leader for stopping the pain. Then they said that was the end of the testing, and the leader helped me up. I put my dress on, and I was going to zip it up, and he took hold of the zipper and zipped it up. And then, I said, I can go now? I can go back to the car? And he said, Barney isn't ready yet. He said that they were they were doing a few more tests with him, but he'd be right along in a minute. I started talking with the leader, and I said to him that this had been quite an experience, that no one would ever believe me, and that what I needed was some proof that this had really happened. He laughed and said, "What kind of proof did I want?" And I said, well, if he could give me something to take back with me, then people would believe it. And so he told me to look around and maybe I could find something I would like to take. And I did. And there wasn't much around. But on the cabinet, there was a book, a fairly big book. And I said, could I have this? And he told me to look in the book. And I did. It had pages and it had writings, but nothing like I had ever seen before. The writing didn't go across. It went up and down. Okay, I'm almost done here. Doctor, did it look like any language that you know, or was it in English? Betty, no, it wasn't in English. And she thought at some point, it goes on from there. But that's just a small transcript of a long thing.
Yeah.
And
so interesting.
Right? And she, like I said, she corroborated her own thing. And here's one final little tidbit of information before I give like the closing thing on the conspiracy of this whole abduction thing, which is interesting in its own self. Star map. Yeah. Let's talk about this. Okay. So she mentions the star map in the hypnosis time and through her dreams. She also talked about it, like remembering that. And she had, Betty Hill had like a really good memory to that. For some reason, it somehow managed to like etch in her mind. Unlike other things, I'm saying, unlike regular memories that you and I might have about what we have for breakfast or whatever.
Yeah.
It's really in there. In 1968, a woman named Marjorie Fish, who had read the famous book at the time of this particular story, the Hill abduction story, called The Interrupted Journey. She was an amateur astronomer and intrigued by the star map that was written in the book of Betty's accounts. Fish wondered if it might be deciphered, like to determine what star system the UFO came from. Assuming that one of the 15 stars on the map must represent the Earth's sun, Fish constructed a three-dimensional model of nearby sun-like stars, i.e., stars deemed to have characteristics that could support life, such as the one we have here on Earth, using thread and beads, basing stellar distances on those published in the 1969 Gileas Star Catalog, which is it's like a what do you call that? It's an informational thing.
Like an encyclopedia of stars.
Thank you. Good. Thank you. Encyclopedia. I just can't think of a word. Studying thousands of vantage points over several years, the only one that seemed to match the Hill map was from a viewpoint of the double star system of Zeta Reticuli. And that is where the title for a lot of the Hill abduction stories connects Zeta Reticuli to as the aliens involved in their abduction and then their release.
Okay.
So, and to say this right now, Zetas, my brief cursory look into it, because we're not about, doing research on the aliens itself, because we don't know for sure. But from my cursory glance at it, is that they are more in the gray fashion of aliens. And
Zeta Grays, right?
Yeah, Zeta Grays. They do have the slanty eyes, and they are humanoid. So it matches a lot of what Betty and Barney described on that fateful evening on September 19th. So it does match many of the characteristics of what we call Zeta aliens. So do want to mention that. So her star map memory seems to correlate and match what we believe are aliens over there.
Wow.
So that's super interesting.
Yes, very.
Yeah. Now, Barney died in the couple. Barney died first in 1969. Betty didn't die until 2004, I believe. And yeah, I know she lasted quite a bit longer. And throughout all that time, Barney wasn't ever into any public domain, telling his story to or lecturing or anything like that. Betty was more akin for that, for sure. And she kept her diary on years. Basically after the first week, she kept diaries the whole time about her dreams and her trauma in general, and noticing that they both had PTSD essentially, or some form of it, ever since that night, because of the invasion of privacy and, their bodily domains.
Yeah.
And it was very gruesome to them. It hit them particularly harder than other victims that Jay and I have talked about on this show, seemingly anyway. I mean, maybe everyone gets affected this way, and maybe Betty and Barney Hill are one of the few who managed to get the word out on their experiences more as in depth. That could also be a case. Because not many people describe their trauma when it comes to all this stuff. Not all the time. People just say what happened and that's it. But here in this story, it's very personal and very like invasion to privacy. But Betty always managed to keep she wanted to tell people. She wanted to do lectures. She did lectures up until she couldn't anymore physically.
Wow.
She would talk to people. She would have interviews. She was on TV at some point on TV. I didn't see the program or anything, but I heard about it. And and throughout this process over the years, even initially when the story was fresher or more fresh, theories abound of whether or not their story is true. Came people who wanted to discredit them came out a lot.
Sure.
And the main discrediting factor that I was able to take, that I'm going to impart here, just in case for those who are still on the fence on it, we should portray a little bit of both sides, is that people think that the reason the hypnosis sessions match, the couple, like Betty matches with Barney and Barney matches with Betty, the reason that it matches so well and that it looks so legitimate and legit and all that is because throughout the 2 years between the incident and the hypnotherapy sessions, Betty was doing meticulous notes and writing and dreaming. And that doing so, more than likely, was telling her husband every time. And that under hypnosis, he was able to corroborate then the stories he was hearing from his wife.
Yeah.
And I will say that is not a notion that I believe in. However, it is a notion that definitely should be introduced because it's possible. I'm not saying it's true, but that's the hardest proof that dissenters have regarding the Hill abduction story. And I do want to mention that here.
No, very good.
But it did come up after. There's definitely a lot of UFO heavy, or websites and books and organizations out there that, were trying to dissent them. They thought that it was kind of fake. Others completely not. Most people kind of believe what I believe, which is that it happened. It's fucked up. We should take notice. The trauma could be real. All that stuff. So it's like 50-50 almost. But
so you're a believer.
I am a believer.
Okay.
And I was just about to ask you at the end of this point, is that what do you believe, Jay?
Oh, man. I believe it's a horrifying story, first of all. You said that Barney was afraid, yet he got out anyway to not show his wife that he was afraid.
Right. He was trying to protect his wife. Yeah.
What a personal, I could see myself doing something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Either to show off, look at me, I'm a badass.
Right.
Or to protect. Either one.
Yeah,
maybe
right.
both hand in hand, but I can see myself doing something like that even though I'm terrified.
Yeah.
What do I think? Man, do I believe in alien abductions? Maybe as a more broad question to start with.
Right.
I do think people are being taken up. I do believe it's happened. It continues to happen. Not everyone's a liar, right? Something I say quite often on this show. Even if just one of those stories is true, what the fuck does that say about the world at large, the universe at large? Even if just one is true, and one has to be true. There's too many, right? In this particular case, I'm always personally kind of skeptical about this hypnotherapy thing, this regression technique when it comes to hypnosis. Any thought could be implanted into a person who's under the influence of a master hypnotist. Who knows? This is a famous story, though. This is why I asked if you could cover this story, because I've heard about it for decades, right? The Betty and Barney Hill story.
Yeah.
From what you've said, it sounds like it could be a legitimate experience.
Yeah.
The hypnosis, I probably myself wouldn't put too much credence into, but overall, the stories matching the whole Zeta Reticuli connection with the Zeta Grays.
Yeah.
Long known that is supposedly a species of alien.
Yeah, and there's some
extraterrestrial.
There's some details that I left out because the story is pretty long, and some of those details are just like a little blander, right? But I think that what sells me, Jay, and I also am not a big proponent, like a big fan of hypnotherapy. Like I'm not saying it's not possible, completely possible. Yes, I'm not saying I don't believe in zero of them, but in general, it seems kind of like 50-50 kind of technique, right?
Yeah, right.
Because you could still be influenced, right? You could very much be influenced to say whatever it is, even if it's subconsciously or the person doing the hypnotherapy session itself. So many other factors. And there are other famous cases that uses hypnotherapy, definitely. But sticking to this story, one thing is that the fact that they tried to get past this, and what they experienced that night, even though they didn't remember, they were going through something the whole time. Like Barney was seeing a doctor, a psychiatrist, before he met Dr. Simon. As a matter of fact, this psychiatrist referred him to Dr. Simon after those 2 years after so many sessions. He finally broke down. Barney finally broke down and told him, like, this is the problem. And he told him the abduction story. He just couldn't, like, he was developing ulcers, like it wasn't
right. Yes.
It was out of a need. It wasn't out of any desire, to find the information out.
Good way to put it. Good way to put it. Out of a need, not a desire.
Right.
Wow.
So even though maybe if not everything they said in the hypnotherapy sessions were 100% accurate, or at least 100% accurate to what they believe they saw, I think that their motive is pretty righteous on what they were trying to accomplish. And I think they thought that figuring out what happened to them could be the key to get past it.
Moving forward. Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing, you mentioned this is an interracial couple.
Yeah.
In 1961.
Yeah.
Not a good time to be an interracial couple in the United States.
No.
The fact that they would go forward being an interracial couple, knowing that, well, especially Betty, right, going forward, because you said Barney kind of sat in the back because Betty was more the spokeswoman, I guess.
Yeah, he died.
Incident.
He died only a short 5 years after the sessions.
Oh, really?
68.
That's what. Okay. The fact that they would bring that sort of attention onto themselves, already being a stigmatized couple.
Yes.
I think that speaks volumes as to
that's another, right?
The authenticity here,
Definitely.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, and they both, they weren't they seemed to have a pretty honest, like everyone kind of saw them honest, no dishonest bone in their body kind of people. Not to mention the work they did, just hard work too on the, blue collar work. And, it was just it just seems like everything. Maybe they were not the right people, but they weren't ever figured to be people that would lie about it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Think about, when we talk about Kenneth Arnold, he was
right.
These high-ranking military officials who interviewed him said, this fucking guy is straight as an arrow.
Right. And the Kenneth Arnold thing was also a very nice, fresh of a relief when I told my story of the Maury Island incident, because the two other guys were kind of shady.
Right. That's right.
But he wasn't in the mix there when he got into the story. And but those differences are there, and you could tell that this couple, the Hills, are much more, like you said, straight as an arrow about their experience.
Damn.
Yeah.
And see, that's the type of shit that I'm terrified of. That missing time, those experiments, those Zeta Grays. Oh, they're so goddamn creepy. I keep looking out of my window here, and I don't know why.
Every time you say it, if you say it in front of a mirror 3 times,
I'm telling you, if I see a little gray head pop up, I'm blasting.
Yeah,
I'm not asking questions.
Are you strapped, Jay, right now?
Always, always within reach.
Yeah.
But no, great story, good research.
Thank you.
So we're continuing our delve into ufology.
I mean, I almost want to read the entire transcript. There's just so much of it, though.
Yeah, and I'm very glad. Speaking of the transcript, you injected those the clip.
Yes,
the,
I know
the,
you.
the
I know
hypnosis
editing magic
session.
allowed. You haven't heard it yet, but
Correct. Yeah. Magic of editing.
Right.
Wow, good stuff. Well,
do we want to sneak peek part 3? No?
I kind of touched on it where we'll talk about, or at least touch on Project Sign, Grudge, and Blue Book.
Okay.
I know you're going to be talking some crop circles.
Yes.
And some other, maybe some famous ufologists and a couple of other little tidbit stories.
Yeah.
To conclude our 3-part series on ufology.
Yes.
Does that sound good?
That sounds hella good. I just don't know if you wanted to tease him a little before we ended.
No, I think that's a good enough tease.
Yeah, good.
All right. Well, if that is it, Oscar, jump us into this UFO and blast us to Zeta Reticuli. I guess.
Done.
So anyway,
just take it to the house where the 872 area code really resides in. You can just leave it there.
Really, that's Casey's basement.
Right.
What it is. Oh, that's bad. That's bad.
The whole time. Well, you went there. I wasn't going there.
Hi, Lexi.
Hello.
How's your game going over there?
It's going pretty well. I just downloaded the custom content.
Oh, for Overwatch?
No.
Zelda.
Now,
is this like the old school Zelda that I would know?
No, it's the new version on the Switch.
Oh. Do you know how many days of my life I put into the original Zelda when I was a kid?
Like 3 years?
Probably. Yeah, ridiculous amounts of time. Just ridiculous.
Cool.
But I loved it, though. Zelda was the shit.
Yeah, Zelda's really fun.
So what are some of the improvement? Did you ever play the original Zelda?
I played the one on the Nintendo DS and the one on the Wii. I don't know which games they were, though.
Oh, okay. Because I would say, what are the improvements, from back then to now?
Zelda's prettier.
Zelda's pretty. Why is Zelda? You said pretty?
Yeah.
Is Zelda a girl?
Yeah, Princess Zelda. But then you have Link, who's the character that we play as.
Link, that's it. Okay, right. Why was the game called Zelda? That's stupid.
Maybe Link's always trying to rescue Zelda.
I think Link needs a hobby.
Yeah.
Does he know what he's getting into by rescuing this woman?
No.
I mean, he's doomed to a life of nagging bills.
Much, yeah.
No, just kidding.
Getting attacked by random things.
That's right. Monsters. Yeah, I don't know. So Oscar left me.
Yeah.
So I told him
Tinkletown.
Yeah, so I told him, at least put Lexi on the mic. What am I going to do? Sit here? So what can we talk about? This was unexpected.
I don't know. Oscar's back though.
There we go. It was good. I tried to think of something off.
That's okay. It's hard to sign off sometimes. I get it. I usually say, as always, I'll see you. Oh, I'll see you in 2 weeks in my other show, right? I say, what do I say at the end? Remember, we're a bi-weekly show. We come out every other weekend next time, or whatever we say we're going to say. And then until then, I say I'm Oscar, and then Rob says I'm Rob. And
right. And then you do your Twitter handles, right?
Yeah, but before that, yeah.
Oh, is it before?
A little bit before. Yeah.
Hold on, let me stop the recording.